The unfortunate thing for me with this film, it just wasn't memorable enough, and I'm just trying to understand why it was for other people. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are back. The Eye of the Storm podcast. I'm here with my boy Daniel.
Hey,
It's just the two of us today, guys. Today we're going to be doing something new. I'm actually pretty excited about this because let's just say it's the first time I'll be going on this journey. Meaning, you know what? Let me let my boy Daniel kind of explain what we're going to be doing in this new series that we're starting.
so this is the start of a new series we're calling Have You Seen, in which we watch a movie that one of us has not seen and the rest know pretty well. And the idea is basically to talk about what the movie is like from somebody who comes in fresh, who has not seen it before, who doesn't know the movie inside out, and then we talk about our feelings. Today we're starting with Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. Somehow you're one of the 3 people in the world that hasn't seen it yet.
Nah, I haven't seen this. Yeah, I haven't seen. I think the one that I did see was the one with, was it John Boyega?
Yeah, that was probably Episode 7, right? The one that came out 10 years ago.
Yes. And I saw bits of New Hope. I haven't seen it in full. So, and I saw, in this was time ago, so I do not remember what. Yeah, I just didn't remember the film whatsoever. So, I did see bits, but I just didn't see the whole film. So, yeah, it was definitely an interesting watch.
So this is one of the most famous movies in all of history, right? So how come you never get around to it? Was it just not interesting, or did you hear
You know what?
something about it you didn't that made it seem not worth watching, or
You know what it is? I think it's an old movie thing. Like, I tend to watch movies that started in the whole 2000 era. Like, the oldest films, that probably like majority of the old films I watch are just usually in the 2000s. In terms of any films that go past that, 90s, yeah, but I'd say that's a bit of a stretch. Any film before that, I just haven't seen. And I don't know. I feel how I feel about films before the 90s is pretty much how I felt about watching the Star Wars movie.
which is
It's not that I don't like them, and it's not that I don't think that they're not good. I just don't feel anything while watching it. Like, I just don't think it. I just feel like it's an alright experience. I don't think I've seen like an old. Actually, I have seen like old films. That's a lie. I have seen old films where I'm like, okay, this is good, but it's rare though. It's rarely. But yeah, when it comes to old movies, I just can't seem to, you know, get the same feeling or emotionally invested into that old films. Maybe it might have to do with like the quality of the. I'm kind of getting to the point with the whole Star Wars film, but it's got to do with like sometimes the aesthetics, so the quality and the acting can be a bit off-putting. But yeah,
it's certainly different. Older movies tend to have slower pacing, for example, and sometimes too slow. I think the further back you go, the more of a gap there is. I tend to just at some point they just become period pieces for me. Like a movie just set in the 60s, the 80s, whatever it is.
They become like period pieces for you. Like, can you kind of elaborate on that?
Like, it's a window into what the world used to be like, right? So how people talk, how they act, how they dress, what life is like for them, what technologies are available to them. And I think stories have also changed by the technology, right? Like, stories before the internet just have this old feel to them, where the characters can't do things that we would do naturally, right? They don't have all the information at their fingertips, and that enables different kinds of plots, for instance, that you could have today, for example. I think there is like a cultural gap to older movies, I think. But I think you're missing out on a lot of great stuff, of things that were made before 2000.
Yeah.
And maybe in this series we'll get to some of them. But we're making the start with Star Wars Episode 4 today, which came out in 1977, I believe.
Yes.
So what were your initial thoughts watching this essentially for the first time?
Before I give my initial thoughts, should we kind of give like a synopsis?
But
Like,
the other two in the world that haven't seen it.
yeah.
Why don't you go ahead and summarize it?
Okay, so pretty much someone called Princess Leia, she gets abducted. She gets abducted by Darth Vader, and then Luke Skywalker, I believe. So he teams up like with a Jedi, and he teams up with
Harrison Ford.
Yes, he teams up with him and the gold robot and the other robot. I don't know what their names are. By the way, guys, I'm terrible with names. Just in movies, I always forget. Just remember that. So in case anyone feels insulted, apologies. But yeah, the gold robot and the other robot that's doesn't talk but rolls around. They pretty much go on a rescue mission, and they try and save like the galaxy as well from Darth Vader and the whole, I believe it was the Galactic Empire.
Mhm.
That's pretty much what I got from the movie.
Okay, yeah, that's pretty spot on. Overall, what did you think of the movie?
You know what? Throughout the film, what was going through my mind was cultural impact. As in, I was a bit confused on why this had such a cultural impact. Don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean that the movie was bad. Overall, my experience with the film was it was an alright experience. It was kind of like what I expected. I expected it to be, like you said, slow. I felt a lot of the old movies are very slow. I did feel like at times the acting felt a bit artificial. I wouldn't say theatrical, because I have seen movies where you can just tell that this is a theatrical film, and I just hate theatrical acting. I could tell, yeah. So I could tell like some of the emotions in this film was genuine.
So there actually is a quote from Harrison Ford that he's mentioned many times in interviews, which is while filming this movie, he is supposed to have said to George Lucas, the director, George, you can write this shit, but I can't say it.
Oh crap! Wait,
so referring to like the dialogue is, I think stilted is a bit unkind, but it's stylized.
Yeah, and you could definitely tell. Besides all of that, I think it was a alright experience. I just think in terms of like the whole cultural impact, because I was confused why this movie had such a big cultural impact, which I'm gonna ask you why. Maybe Daniel, you'll know, but like for example, the First Omen.
Yeah.
No, the First Omen, as in like the first Omen movie that ever came out.
Yeah.
I understand why that had a cultural impact. By the way, I haven't actually seen the movie fully. I've seen clips of it, but I've never seen the movie fully. So that might be another film that we need to check out in the future. Yeah. With the First Omen, I understand why that had such a cultural impact. I saw the aftermath of what actually happened. People. I'm saying me and Daniel, we both saw it. People fainting in the cinema at the time.
That's The Exorcist, not Omen.
Oh, sorry, The Exorcist. Yes, The Exorcist. Apologies.
I mean, Omen came out more or less the same time. Not sure. I'd have to look up the year, but yeah, that's The Exorcist you're talking about.
I mentioned the First Omen because the First Omen is actually the recent film that just came out. Apologies, but so The Exorcist. I understand why that has such a cultural impact because I'm saying like religion's a big thing in society. You know what I'm saying? And so obviously when a film like that comes out, I think that was one of the first. Was that one of the first like supernatural type of film that was released in the day?
I don't know about that, but it basically was one of the first to depict an exorcism and kind of brought it back into the consciousness. But yeah, you can see like I think when you see that movie for the first time, it looks a bit basic as well. But that's because it's been copied for 50 years. And I think Star Wars is similar, where a lot of it, I think, when you just take it apart and look at the pieces, it's kind of basic, but it kind of just works, and it's been imitated many, many times.
That's the reason why. That's why I was a bit confused. Why is it that this one was so impactful in the culture, in the movie industry, in comparison to any other one?
So one of the parts of it is that George Lucas, during his career, routinely invented entirely new types of making films in order to make his visions come true. So every time he's made a Star Wars movie, he has pushed forward special effects technology. And you see this in like things like, when I talk about the Death Star, for instance, and other places, like the use of models and all of that, it basically pushed the boundaries of what was possible at the time. And so our audience had not seen anything like this before. Even if today we are like 20 years into the CGI era and we can put anything we want on screen, but back then people had to think very carefully about what to put on screen and how to realize it. And this movie really pushed the boundaries when it came to that. So it literally showed people things they didn't thought were possible before.
So can we say then, is it fair to say that the new experience that people were witnessing and obviously the cultural impact that it had was bigger than the movie itself?
I'm not sure you can separate the two. Like, this was an enormous hit, also fairly unexpected. If you were in 77, it kind of came this weird sci-fi movie that ripped off everything from Japanese samurai movies to westerns to World War II war movies to sci-fi serials from the 20s. Like it's very clear what its influences are, but it just this weird mix of stuff came out and just blew people away, and it kept people's attention for 50 years.
So does it get better down the line then? Because let me not make it seem like I'm ranting on this movie, because overall, like I said, it was an alright experience. If I had to rate the film, I'd give it I think this rate will improve down the line if the films do get better. But starting from now, I'd say I have to say it's a 5 out of 10.
Bottom line is, it was pretty good, but it didn't blow your mind.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. I had like an average experience. If I have an average experience, to me, that's a 5. Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah. So, but to be fair, this is the start of a journey. Do you know what I'm saying? Because with Luke, we didn't really see him like developed. I'm guessing his character develops, right?
And since we're doing these in sequence, I don't want to talk too much about what comes later.
So
But
I don't know. But to be fair, in terms of Luke's character, I didn't feel too like I didn't feel disappointed with his character. It's kind of similar with Planet of the Apes, right? The new protagonist in the Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, right? Hervey, he mentioned how he kind of felt underwhelmed with his character because he wasn't like Caesar. But my argument with that was he's like they're kind of building a new world. Like they're moving forward, so they're kind of like building a new world. So with this character, instead of because Caesar kind of came into the game, kind of came into the world, and he was already that guy. Whereas they're doing a new approach with the new protagonist. Is like, okay, he's gonna kind of build into that. So I'm assuming it's gonna be the same with Luke. Yeah. So that's why I wasn't really too underwhelmed or disappointed with his character, because even though I didn't really see, because the way Luke is described, even though I haven't seen this franchise, but though I've heard of this guy's name in the movie industry, and the way that this guy is described, it's like he is the next Messiah. So I'm like, all right, cool. I didn't experience that in the first movie, but I wasn't disappointed by that. I'm sure because there's many more movies to come. I'm sure he's gonna develop into that character. So I'm kind of intrigued to see how his character develops. So like I said, the movie was alright. It just wasn't memorable for me. But there were things that I did like in the film. Like I did definitely like I love the whole pub scene. That pub scene was amazing. It was very gritty as well. I wasn't expecting
that's the cantina scene where they meet Han Solo.
Yeah, when they meet the pilot, him, especially when he killed the other alien guy who he owed money to. That scene, I wasn't expecting that. The way that happened, I was like, oh damn, like this. It felt like there were times where it was very gritty and it was surprising. What is this movie rated? Age?
I have no idea, but it's like a lot of people think of it as a children's movie, and at this point we already have murder, organized crime, and dismemberment, and we're gonna keep going from here. But yeah, I take my issues with the idea that Star Wars is a children's movie, but I think it's meant to be accessible to everybody.
Yeah, I definitely believe so, because those times, especially like with Darth Vader's presence coming in, I'm like, yo, like this feels, this definitely does feel like an adult can watch it, because those times it was very great, like with the whole pub scene and the pub interactions that Luke had with just a random guy coming in bothering him, and then when what's his name, the Jedi, what's his name, when he cut off his arm. Even though you could tell that the movie was way back in the day, because the way that he cut, like if the movie now, it'll probably show you him cutting off his arm, but that technique that he was still effective because you felt it. And like I think it was quiet for a second, even though he was screaming, it was quiet for a second, not too long after, and I was like, hey, damn, you know what I'm saying? So there were definitely parts in the movie that I liked. Like I said, especially with Darth Vader, you could feel its presence. So would you say that a lot of people, like, would you say how influential and impactful would you say Darth Vader's introduction into the whole movie industry through this movie had on the movie industry?
I would say he's one of the most iconic villains in movie history. His voice, his demeanor, his costume, his presence, like everything about it just works, I think. What was your experience of him?
Like I said, my experience, he definitely brought the fear factor to the film. That's why, that's why I felt just like his coldness. And I'm intrigued to find out why he's so cold, because I don't know why he's cold. It doesn't seem like he's motivated by power, but at the same time it does. So it's...
Yeah. So we know a few things about him, right? We know he works for the Empire. We know he's kind of follows this ancient religion that nobody else believes in anymore. He has supernatural powers, right? He can manipulate the Force, and he does it to hurt other people in order to dominate them. And he is feared, but also kind of despised by the other Imperials, right? Like he stands outside everybody else, right? He doesn't seem to live in the same world as they do.
Yeah. Nah, I agree. I think there was one, I forgot what scene it was, but they were all together.
There's this meeting scene where they talk about how the rebels have stolen the plans to the Death Star, and how the Senate has been disbanded, and how they're assuming direct control and that sort of thing, right?
Yeah. Was this movie, the connection between Darth Vader and Obi-Wan, that wasn't highlighted, right? As in, it wasn't revealed.
Well, there are a few scenes, right? Like Obi-Wan talks about how Luke's father used to be his best friend, right?
Yeah.
And Darth Vader killed Luke's father. So they both were his students as Jedi, right? And Vader killed Anakin Skywalker and then turned to the dark side of the Force. So that's basically what we know about him, right? And from their confrontation on the Death Star, we know that they have a long history together, and that they have this long-standing grudge, and that both basically think the other one is on the wrong side of this, right? So those are basically two big scenes involving Obi-Wan. First Obi-Wan talking to Luke, and then Obi-Wan fighting Darth Vader,
And
where we get a bunch of background.
Was that when they were in the ship, or was that after? 'Cause I know obviously after Luke's parents got killed. I'm just trying to remember which.
That's
scene
why his aunt and uncle.
Yeah, sorry, his aunt and uncle. Apologies. Yeah. So what did you think about the film when you first watched it?
So it's one of my favorite movies ever. I think it's a borderline perfect movie.
Okay, and now I'm interested. Why?
So that's kind of hard to explain without kind of revealing stuff that comes later on, right?
No, I'm talking about this in particular, not the whole franchise
right. But if I explain why something is significant, that's because of what it does in the next movie. So just as an example, the opening scene. What did you think of the opening scene? The opening scene is the small ship being pursued by the larger ship, and the stormtroopers and Darth Vader come aboard and they take Leia hostage, and they have an exchange about what they're doing and why. Like, how long did you think it took you before you had an idea of what was going on? Who these people were, what the situation was, and why they were doing what they were doing. Like, did it happen quickly, or did it take most of the movie, or somewhere in between?
I'd probably say most of the movie, but I didn't understand the significance of Princess Leia. Like, I'll be honest with you, to this day, I don't really understand the significance of Princess Leia.
So they say that she's a member of the Senate. So she's a senator, essentially representing her planet in the Galactic Senate, and that Senate is part of the Empire, and Vader represents the Empire. And there's also a rebellion which Leia supports, but she denies it, and she keeps insisting that this is an illegal attack, and she's on official diplomatic business and so on. So that all happens in like the first 3 minutes.
Personally, for me, what was memorable about obviously that opening scene was, of course, Darth Vader. I think that's what, once he was introduced, I wouldn't say I blacked out, but I would say that was like my main focus, and obviously wondering why. He was definitely looking for someone. That's who I knew he was looking for, but I just, that was like my main focus. I think that's the only thing that I kind of got out. That was kind of the only thing that was memorable for me. In that scene was obviously Darth Vader's introduction. In terms of the story itself, in terms of like, Princess Leia, no, I'll be honest with you, I wasn't following that at all. It just wasn't like, it just, man, I think the unfortunate thing for me with this film, it just wasn't memorable enough, and I'm just trying to understand why it was for other people. Like, what about it? Is it the politics in the film that's what attracts people to it?
So I think on the front of politics, I think what this movie does really well is it uses very broad archetypes to get you to understand what's going on. You have the Empire that rules over the Senate, and there is the rebellion, and there are Jedi Knights that used to be guardians of peace and the innocent, but they're gone now, and they went away when the Empire took over, and things like that. Like, these are all very broad labels and very general categories, but we kind of understand what's going on with them. And all of that is supported by how things look, right? So everything to do with the Empire is black and white. It's very tidy. It's very clean. And then once you go away from the Empire to the outskirts that are technically the Empire, but that are kind of on the fringes, everything gets like that. It's very dusty. You have many more aliens, so every character looks different, whereas in the Empire, everybody looks the same, right? So all of these things kind of all reinforce each other. And that is like one of the little pieces of the brilliance of the movie, in my opinion. Like, we had this just a few weeks ago with Rebel Moon, right? And after even 2 movies, we had no idea what the bad guys were about. And here, I think we find it out immediately just by looking at what they look like and how they act. And before they even start talking. And then once they start talking, we get more information. And then we have that briefing scene where in like 2 minutes, we get a lot of information, like how this used to be a democracy, and the Senate is kind of still around, but it's been increasingly obsolete. And now that the Death Star has been completed, the Empire has the power to seize so much power that they can officially do away with the Senate, which has been kind of a puppet up until now. And we don't know for how long, but it's been less than a lifetime, right? Because Obi-Wan, as a young man, fought in something called the Clone Wars, right? But now the Empire is in a position to do away with all of these appearances and can just seize raw power. And we find all of that out in about less than 2 minutes of dialogue. So I don't think the politics is that interesting. Like that, it's not Game of Thrones, right? Mm-hmm. But it's it paints a picture very effectively, I thought, in everything from the names that are being used to the character designs to how people talk and how this information is communicated. And we get a couple of scenes of raw exposition. Like there's 2 scenes where Obi-Wan explains his history to Luke, but those are not overly long and they are tied to personal stakes, right? Like Luke wants to find out about his father, and that's how Obi-Wan talks about what he and Anakin did during the Clone Wars. Like even though it is never explained what the Clone Wars were, only that they happened. So I think the politics in this is, and let's remember that, because if we keep going on to further movies, this will become important. I think the politics of this is actually really solid, and I think it has one of the best uses of exposition and of archetypes that I think I've ever seen in a movie. To the point where I think anybody writing screenplays should study how it's done. And one of the big criticisms I have of current Star Wars is that the people who make it don't understand this. That they don't seem to understand just how genius the writing is in this movie, in my opinion, in terms of getting you to understand what this world is like and what's happening in it and why people are doing what they're doing. Like it's like just on a matter of getting information to the audience and making them understand it. I think it's the most efficient I've ever seen in a screenplay.
But because, okay, so do you think maybe it has anything to do with the reason why I'm not resonating with this as much as you are? Do you think it has anything to do with the whole performance pretty much factor? Because remember, you did mention that a lot of the old movies are very slow, right? And one of the points which I'll be bringing up in our Planet of the Apes discussion is there were many times where it was very slow, which I didn't like. So with this movie, it feels like it does build up in intensity, especially near Act 3. But I'd say a big chunk is, especially regarding to its performance, it can be very slow. So
yeah.
And like I said, at times it kind of felt, the acting did kind of felt artificial. So do you think that would hinder the movie I wouldn't say as a whole, but it would hinder the film in a sense where someone who isn't like picking up on certain points like you just made regarding like the whole politics, for example, do you think it would kind of hinder their experience? Because I feel like it hindered my experience because, like I said, the acting felt very artificial. At times it felt very slow. So I think that might be a contributing factor to why I kind of clocked out at certain points in the film. Why, for example, the points that you're making, I was like, oh crap, I did not know that's what was going on. Do you know what I'm saying? So do you think?
But you didn't have to necessarily understand it, right? But I think a lot of it has more to do with that you get a sense that you knew who the stormtroopers were. Like why they, like from their appearance, did that tell you anything compared to, say, the guards on Leia's ship? They because they're not wearing the same kinds of uniforms, right? For one, they're showing their faces, and it's not full body armor, and they don't all look exactly the same and things like that.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of this stuff works on a subconscious level. Like you don't need to analyze it necessarily. I think if you do, you'll find stuff to analyze, but a lot of it is just subconscious.
Okay. But question, how did you feel about the acting?
It's not naturalistic acting, right? It is kind of stylized. I personally like it because it makes it feel timeless, right? It makes it feel like you're looking into a galaxy far, far away, a long time ago, right? Like it's you are in a different place. And I don't think it impacts the movie in a negative way. Like I don't have a harder time caring about these characters because they talk in a slightly stilted way. Okay. It gives it kind of a mythic feel for me. Okay. Like if these movies were worse, then I would have more issue with it. But I think it works really well with what it's trying to do, right? It's not supposed to be of our time. It's not supposed to be. These are not supposed to be people like us. These are supposed to be very far removed from us.
Okay. So I kind of need to have it seems like I need to have like a different outlook when it comes to this film, because obviously the rating that I gave, right? I kind of portrayed that as well with the rating I gave, because I said, even though this is a 5 and I gave him a 5, it's not like the same 5. So subconsciously that already, did enter like a different outlook when it comes to the rating.
But it didn't wow you. You didn't say, oh wow, this is incredible, I have to see more.
Exactly. It was just, there were points where at the end of the film, I was intrigued to find out more about Darth Vader and obviously Luke's journey. So I'm not going to say it didn't totally pique my interest, because there were times where it did pique my interest. But all in all, it wasn't, it wasn't the experience I wanted. As in, like, I wanted to experience what everyone else experienced when it comes to why this is one of the best franchises in film history. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So and I don't know if that's gonna change. So I'm intrigued to see if my opinion on this film will change throughout. Once I start watching more of the films, because like I said, I felt the same with Dune. Like I remember when Dune 1 came out. Like I said, it was good, but I didn't understand why people were like raving about it. I was like, bro, like the movie was good. Like, it wasn't. People were making it seem like it was the best film ever that was ever made.
Yeah.
But then when Dune 2 came, which was, like I said, it was top 3 films of all time for me. I don't know if it's sci-fi or all time. I think probably all time. But yeah, it was definitely top 3 films all time for me. Dune 2. It definitely made Dune 1 way better. I feel like.
So what would this movie have to do to get you on board? Like, what would you if you could write a wish list of things to be in episode 5? What would that be?
I'll definitely have to say it's the pace. It has to be the pace. I think there has to be there just has to be progression when it comes to the pace, and especially when it comes to the performance. There kind of has to be I personally, for me, I think it's the pace and it's the performance. It just has to. It just has to be something that I can kind of latch onto, because I didn't really feel emotionally connected with him.
Yeah.
Like, that's the problem. I didn't feel emotionally connected with him because I just didn't believe. I just didn't fully believe in the way that they were performing. So
yeah,
I didn't have no issues with the story itself. Like the story itself, it was fine. It's just the way that the story was being portrayed, and just like I said, the pace of it was just very slow. So it was very hard for me to keep my concentration. So, but now that I'm into it, I felt the same with Dune. I told you, I felt the same with Dune. It was good, but it just first, I didn't understand what the hell was going on. There was so much politics going on in that film. I was like, what the hell was going on? Just understanding the world.
And I think this is much easier, right? Like there's two to three factions depending on how you count, and it's a very straightforward plot, right?
No, definitely.
Compared to Dune, definitely.
Definitely, I agree. So with this, and how many Star Wars movies is there that we got in this?
So there's 3 trilogies.
Okay.
And then there's a couple of spin-off movies. But the main story is 6 to 9 movies, depending on how you count, that each come in trilogies.
Okay, so so I'm sure, I'm hoping it will develop into, it will just develop into something I like, and I hope when it comes to obviously the pace of the film, who knows? Maybe because now I know the backstory of Star Wars from watching the first movie. Maybe in my experience, it will be the same with Dune, where the second will be more enjoyable, because like I said, this is the beginning of a journey, so I just gotta be patient.
So I think one of the reasons why Star Wars was such a hit with people and for such a long time, just between the 3rd movie and the 4th movie were like 12 years. I think 88 to 99 or something like that. So for over a decade there was no new Star Wars, right? But people still discovered these movies, and they still cared about them and got excited about them, even though there was nothing new for a long time. Right? It's not like today where it's like there's 5 shows and movies and whatever else, right? For a long time, a Star Wars movie was something that happened rarely. And I think one of the reasons why it has captured the imagination of so many people is that it in a lot of people it evokes a sense of wonder. Right, you want to find out about more about this world. You want to see what's around the corner. You want to see what happens next. You want to see what will happen to these characters. But aside from the immediate story, where they find Leia, where they get the plans to the rebels, will they be able to destroy the Death Star? Like that's the immediate plot, right? But while this is happening, we're going to different planets. We are encountering all these different alien species. Was there ever a point where you just cared about the world and wanted to see more of it?
To be honest, no. But it did make me wonder about what was next. So I think that's mainly because I've seen so many sci-fi movies. So I've seen so many different worlds, and I don't think I even had any wonder when it comes to Dune 2. I wasn't like completely fascinated and mind blown by that world. I was just I was more intrigued to see, okay, what's next, and I feel like that's how I am with most movies. If there is like an ending, like an ending which is open, I'm like, okay, what's next? So I understand, but I do understand where you're coming from, because like this film back at the audiences are witnessing a new experience, obviously with the technology that's being used, and the effects, the CGI, all of that. So I do understand why they would experience. So
like for example, that like at one point Obi-Wan mentions that he and Luke's father fought together in the Clone Wars. You didn't want to find out what the Clone Wars were, or what Anakin was like, or why Darth Vader killed him.
No, I did want to. No, I did go over that though. It made like there were times where okay, so maybe I should kind of retract what I said. So there were times I mentioned this earlier that it made me want to know more about Darth Vader's story and obviously Luke's story as well. So
Yeah.
I'd say maybe.
I mean, it's fine if the answer is no, right? I'm just saying a lot of people had this experience, and I think that's the secret for why it has the staying power. Like these movies were made like over a decade before I was born, right? So like for both of us, these are old movies. So we're not really nostalgic for it in that way, right? Like somebody who saw it in the summer of '77. I'm just saying like its core appeal. I think like anybody who really cares about this stuff does so because their imagination was sparked by the mentions of the Clone Wars, or they wanted to see the spice mines of Kessel, or they wanted to see more of the Empire, or things like that, or they were looking forward to the next planet that we would go to, because each one is different and anything could be there, right? So stuff like that. So I think a lot hinges on whether or not you can get into that headspace. And it sounds like you like that wasn't your experience.
No. Like, I was only gonna retract. I was saying I might retract my statement, not fully, but just a bit, because I did mention with the whole Darth Vader, like I was intrigued in his character, why he became, and obviously what's next for him. Do you know what I'm saying in the story?
Yeah.
So, but all in all, you're right. I can't say that I did. But to be fair, do you think that most people who who've never seen Star Wars before and were to see Star Wars, and let's say they're like Gen Z, do you think, because we've experienced so much, especially we're in an area where the technology used in movies is, is amazing. Do you know what I'm saying? So we've already experienced the aesthetics that we've experienced and the worlds that we experience in movies is already amazing. So I'm not saying the one in Star Wars is amazing, but you could tell, of course, the upgrade and obviously throughout time. Do you think people would have like the same outlook that I had, or the same opinions that I had when it comes to Star Wars? Because you mentioned the point about it triggered wonder when it comes to the world and obviously what next in that. Do you think people can have like the same opinion that I had, because we've already seen so much? So when we're going back in time and watching a film such as Star Wars, do you think they'll be mind blown, or they,
I think people are not going to be wowed by the effects, right? And that is one way in which a modern audience would experience it differently. But also, chances are people have seen a lot of Star Wars, whether that's in games or pop culture or spoofs or whatever it might be, right? So I think it has a different impact. I think if you're going to get it, I have no idea like what happens when you put like a 14-year-old today in front of, like, I have a vivid memory of like being 13, 14 and seeing, I think I saw episode 5, just a clip, like how I started halfway through, right? And it was just magic. Right, like it just pulled me in. I had no idea what was going on. I didn't know who these characters were. I didn't know what a lightsaber was. But it just felt like magic, and it felt like I was looking into a different world. And I have no idea if a 14-year-old today will have that same experience if there's so much other stuff competing for their attention, and they're used to things that at least look better. So, like, final question, because we're getting on in time. So you have not seen the other movies. You don't know what's going to happen in them, right? No. So based on what you've seen and the fact that the next movie is called The Empire Strikes Back, what's your expectations, and where do you think the story will go, and what do you think the next movie will be like?
I think we're going to see more of Luke and Darth Vader. I think Luke's going to start to develop more into the iconic figure that, the cinema world describes him as. I feel like it's going to be a bit of Dune 2, where, of course, there's going to be more action. Hopefully it's going to be more fast paced, because obviously Strikes Back kind of gives off that vibe. And obviously we're going to know, and I think there's going to be like a relationship that builds between Luke and Princess Leia. I don't know what it's going to be. I don't know if it's going to be like a love relationship focused when it comes to this film as well. So yeah, I think the main point is, I think it's going to be way more fast paced. It's going to be similar to Dune, like Dune 1, Dune 2. Dune 1 was pretty slow. It was kind of like an introduction to the world, explaining the world. Even though Star Wars was way faster when it comes to that comparison, I still think Star Wars was still like the introduction of the world, really. But yeah, Star Wars, the second Empire Strikes Back, I definitely feel like it's going to pretty much be the same like Dune 2, where it's going to be more action packed and the pace is just going to be faster. Hopefully, that's what I'm hoping.
Okay. We'll know more next week. I look forward to it.
Yeah. Cool. I look forward to it as well. I want to see if my opinion changes on this. I'm just gonna leave it at that, man. I'm definitely intrigued to see what happens next.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you for tuning into today's episode. Let us know what you think. Do you think I'm crazy? Do you think I'm barking mad? Do you think Daniel's crazy? Do you think he's barking mad? I wouldn't necessarily. Do you agree with any of us? You know what I'm saying? Well, like, whose opinions do you agree with more? Let us know what you just. Let's let us know your thoughts down below. And yeah, we will catch you next week. Bye bye.
Bye bye.